Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you live a better life right now. And now your host, Marco Salinas.
And welcome back to another episode of Business Innovators Radio. I am your host, Marco Salinas, and joining me today, I have Mr. Christopher Cavazos with BRCK Criminal Defense Attorneys, based out of San Antonio, Texas. And today we're going to be talking to Chris about his journey and where he started and where he's at today and what he's up to with his law firm and who he helps and what type of clients they are and all that good fun stuff. So, Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful that you invited me on here.
Absolutely. These opportunities to talk about our business are always a lot of fun. You know, and this is one of my favorite environments here, the podcast, right? Which is not too formal, a laid back conversation. We get to have the opportunity to just share and interact. And so it's a perfect setup. It's a perfect place for us to discuss things like business and hobbies and all the things that we're doing and all the things that we're into. But I want to learn also a little bit about you today. So I've got a few questions to ask you about yourself and you know what your early journey was like. But before I do that, Chris, do me a favor. If I just met you and I didn't know who you were, I call, of course, this the elevator pitch. If we were stuck in an elevator together for about 20, 30 seconds, I said, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? Could you give me your 30-second pitch about, what it is you do and kind of who you specialize on helping?
Sure. So the idea behind our law firm is, you see TV lawyers and they're so aggressive and they're so smooth and it's this thing. And, that's not really our pitch. Our pitch is essentially that we try to help good people that have kind of been arrested and they're going through something in their lives. And we're just trying to get them back on track, and so the idea is always how can we put an arrest behind you? How can we put a situation behind you? How can we use an arrest or a situation that's come up in your life as a springboard, right, to get better? Whether you got some issues with substance abuse or anger or whatever it is, okay, something happened. Now's the time to get back on track, get back on board, and try to fix things. And so that's generally our idea. We don't come across as super aggressive and all that kind of stuff. The idea is we want to help people get back on track after they've been arrested. So our law firm, only criminal defense. That's all we do. We don't do car wrecks. We don't do divorces. We don't know anything about it. I wouldn't know the first thing how to do a trust or a will. But, if you get arrested for something, you call us and we can certainly help you out.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah. My idea of like going to the doctor and if there's something wrong with my hand or something wrong with my heart, like I want a specialist, I want somebody that specializes in the heart. If I've got a heart problem, I would prefer not have the generalist show up who's kind of somewhat versed in all these different areas working on something as important as my heart, right? And I think that law is another category where I want a specialist. I want somebody that doesn't just dabble in certain categories that are super important. I'm sure criminal and the other types of law that you mentioned, each one of those is probably its own kind of beast, right? And so you can go really deep into each of those categories. And you guys obviously decided to focus on criminal law, and I think that's a big enough animal as it is, and it probably requires a lot of specialization. So I think that's fantastic that you guys are just focused on that one category. That's really, really big.
And the idea too is the law is just constantly changing. So, it's even if you've said, well, I went to law school and I think I know a lot, that's great. But I mean, keeping up with the changes in the law and the new laws that come out every year, it's a full-time job. And so I'm just not sure. I think you have to specialize, and you're just going to fall behind, and you're not going to provide, your clients with the defense or the services that they deserve. So yeah, specialization, incredibly important in a lot of different areas, particularly in law.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, are you from San Antonio? Did you grow up in San Antonio? Where are your roots? Where is your upbringing?
Sure. Started off in Houston and then moved to Austin for college, Texas Longhorns, and then over here to San Antonio to St. Mary's Law for my law school. And then, met my wife, started a family, and just stayed here in San Antonio. And That's where we're based out of now. And we're expanding to different markets, different offices. And we're trying to grow into Austin a little bit and hopefully some other major cities after that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about what prompted you to start looking at that direction of the legal world. Do you have somebody in your family that was already doing that? Like what was your inspiration for just, I guess maybe when you were in high school or college saying, you know what, I think I want to be a lawyer. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Sure. So I remember pretty clearly. My mom, when I was about high school, first year, second year, walked into my bedroom and in one hand she had a magazine of the best medical schools, and the other magazine was the best law schools. And she told me, "Hey, you're picking one of these, and this is what you're doing." And so, I had this strong Mexican mom telling me what to do, and I wasn't good at math and science, so I said, "All right, I guess I'll go to law school." And from that point on, it kind of got stuck in my head, and you kind of grateful to it because maybe nobody in my family had gone to law school or anything like that. My dad was in the Army, my mom was a teacher, and so for them to kind of put in the head, like, hey, this is something you should pursue. This is something that you can do. It was early in my life. She kind of told me, hey, you're probably going this route, so pick it and go with it. And that's how it started. I never thought about it again. And then all of a sudden I was in law school.
Wow, man, that is really cool. The power of the mom's influence, right? Especially the Mexican mom.
Yep. And when you're young, and I mean, they come to you and say, "Hey, you got to pick one." I didn't have anything else I was doing, so it made sense, and I picked one.
Right, right. No, that's really awesome. Now, what about you? I'm sure you did some sort of inventory or something and looking at all the different pathways, right? That you could go in the legal world. What was it that kind of pushed you more of the criminal defense route?
Sure. I mean, and it's no disrespect to the other practice fields, but a lot of them to me were just boring.
Yeah,
Reviewing paper documents and depositions and all this stuff that I just couldn't see myself doing. And then criminal law kind of appeared on my radar, and it's such an interest. Criminal law is a lot of fun. I mean, you get to meet all kinds of interesting individuals. The cases are never boring. We'll have people come into our office with, I mean, just the most outlandish things you could think of. And when new employees start at our office, they're always, engaged by the stories and how interesting they are. And then there's a lot at stake. People oftentimes, especially our clients, they're looking at big, sentences. They could go to prison. Their lives are on the line. And so it's just interesting. And, it's a lot of fun. It's interesting, and it matters. It matters a lot.
yeah,
And so, I find that to be a good reason to get into that area and then stay in the area. And then at this point, like I said earlier, I don't know anything else. I just don't.
sure.
I've been practicing for about 16 years now, and all 16 years have been devoted to criminal law. I don't know how to do a will. I just don't. I don't know how to do a trust. Divorces, I refer them out. And so
Yep.
at this point, it's all I know. But it's interesting.
So,
It's fun. Again, it's a good way to spend your life is, working with people through their problems, trying to find solutions, trying to help them move on
yeah.
from these things that have come up.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I have a couple of friends that are actually criminal attorneys, and one thing's for certain: if we're at a social event, these guys always have the best stories. Nobody's stories are going to compare to the stuff that these guys have to share, right? People like you, because the stuff that you're seeing on a daily basis, it trumps the excitement of anybody else, right? That anything else that's going on in my office or at the school or whatever other people's career is, right? The criminal defense attorney is the guy with the doggone exciting, fun, crazy, wild stories. So that's
And that's
one
what they
thing for
always
sure.
say. It doesn't always pay the best, and there's other areas that you can make a bunch of load more money,
Sure,
but nobody gets as good stories as criminal defense. And so,
to say the least.
I love
Yeah.
it. I'll never do anything other than criminal law.
That's awesome. Now, one thing that I have learned in having a couple of friends in that world was that I think before I met them, I always kind of just assumed like, I kind of had maybe let's call it, just for a lack of a better term, let's call it what it is, right? It's kind of a cold-hearted mindset towards anybody that found themselves arrested, right? Anybody that was under arrest was like, well, I'm sure you deserved it. I'm sure you did, whatever it was that you did, you asked for it. And it's not to say that that's not the case in plenty of circumstances, but one thing I learned was that that's not certainly not always the case, right? First and foremost, sometimes good people get accused of things that they didn't do, right? That's the first thing. Sometimes people are
Absolutely.
just flat out innocent. They didn't do it and they got accused of it, or the way it all lined up, it just kind of looks like they're the ones that are the guilty party. And so our founding fathers were wise enough to, look at the way it was, where they came from, and realizing that people need to have a representation. They need to have a voice if they find themselves in that circumstance. So that's one of the probably the most foundational and important things about what you're doing is you really are upholding the Constitution, right? I mean, am I right about that?
Absolutely. And, we have this saying that, everybody's very tough on crime until it's your family or your son. And like I said, look, I grew up, my dad was a colonel in the Army. We were as strict as possible. That's why after at some point I was a prosecutor for the state. Very law and order. And, I can't tell you now as a defense attorney how many times, I talk to somebody and it's a dad or it's somebody and he says, well, look, normally I would never say this, but, my son's situation is a little different or my daughter's situation is a little different. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's the idea is that, every case is unique and the people are individual and it is easy to be kind of like, hey, let's throw them all in jail and, and forget the key. But it changes when it's you or it's your family or it's your son, and all of a sudden, you do value that due process, and you do value, well, okay, maybe they do deserve representation, and maybe I shouldn't just throw them in front of the judge and let them get the maximum sentence. Maybe there is some sort of rehabilitation that would be helpful for them in their future and things like that. So,
Sure.
it's a little more complex than let's just throw everybody in jail. And again, there's a lot of people who get arrested that it's a bump in the road. It's a comma, not a period.
Right.
And if the situation is handled the right way, it can be a jumping off point for them to, really get their lives together and get back on track and fix whatever problems, they may have. And so I like looking at the criminal justice system through that process,
Sure.
of
Yeah.
how can we take somebody and again, don't get me wrong, even as a defense attorney, there are certainly individuals and there's certainly situations that require nothing but punishment, right?
Sure.
I
Sure.
mean, there is retribution and society requires that, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But there's certainly situations where people can be helped, and maybe that's a good way to go through handling people who have problems in our society.
Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. No, that's very well said. Now, this podcast is called Business Innovators. So, ultimately at the end of the day, yes, you're an attorney, but you're also a business owner, right? And so in this case, can you tell me a little bit about what it was like in the earlier years of you starting your practice? One of the things that I like to ask any business owner is, how did you overcome difficulties? Were the first couple of years super easy? Did everything go perfect for you, Chris? Or did you guys have some roadblocks that you had to overcome just from the business perspective? Can you share a little bit about maybe, encountering some sort of a difficulty or a setback that you were able to overcome in the early years?
Sure, absolutely. No, lawyers, kind of like a lot of professionals, doctors and accountants, they're, maybe they're very good and they're specialized in their area of expertise. But that certainly doesn't make them good business owners and good businessmen and women. And so, when we first started the law firm, while I can say like, hey, I think we've always been really good lawyers in terms of running a business, in terms of marketing and keeping human resources, keeping employees, measuring things, metrics, KPIs, taxes, all that kind of stuff that comes with running a normal business. We were pretty behind on it, and I think most lawyers and most doctors are when they start up their own practices. And so for us, it was a process of learning how to run a business, and
Yeah.
not necessarily a law firm, learning how to run a business.
Right. Right.
And that's one of the things that I learned pretty early on was that, a law firm is just a business. When you file your taxes, there's no special, criteria. I mean, you're an S corp or you're an LLC. I mean, there's no law firm where it has its own special rules. So we are constantly trying to learn how to run a business.
Yeah.
And you get mentorships, you grow in groups, you get on message boards, and that's really where my focus is these days, is running it, not necessarily as just a law firm, but running it
Yeah.
as a good, profitable business. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, you go through law school, you learn all these things about the legal process, right? They're not talking to you at all about how to market, said law firm, right? They're not talking to you about how to manage the payroll, how to deal with the employees, like you were mentioning, and all these HR and all these things, right? So none of that is covered. None of that is covered, right?
None of
In
it.
law,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And so you make mistakes. I mean, you're just constantly making mistakes, and it's that make mistakes faster kind of mentality where, I mean, I look back at how we used to run payroll, and, it was probably illegal, right? I mean, like, there's just so many things that we were like, man, like, we just had no clue what we're doing. And, after a number of years, you finally get a hold on some of it, but there's always more to learn when you're trying to run a business. There's always more to do.
That's
There's
right.
always new concepts coming up, and so it's fun. But man, those first couple of years, we were a good law firm, but a really poorly run business.
Sure. Yeah. As is customary for most new businesses anyways, right? So a lot of us really do learn from trial and error, and that is the best way, but it's also the most painful way to learn.
Yeah.
Right? Typically,
Building the bicycle while you're on it, right? I mean, it hurts. You fall.
That's right. That's right. Now they call it also a law practice for a reason. I mean, in a sense, you're practicing and you're learning the process of how to be a great attorney, right? And so you have that angle, but for you guys, it's kind of a dual road there. You also have that secondary road of, I'm also just learning how to run this business as well. So there's a big load on lawyers' shoulders, especially in their early years, right? When you're trying to be a fantastic lawyer and also trying to be a fantastic business owner. And so those are two things that have to be tackled. Now, do you guys have a process for, or I should probably say, what is your process for finding clients? Are you guys mostly referral based? How do customers seem to find you in the majority of cases?
Sure. And so, it's like a lot of business, like a restaurant, a lot of it's marketing. We spend a lot on Google. You get on Yelp. We do, fortunately, because we've been around for a while, I think we have a pretty good reputation. We do get some of those referral businesses. But a lot of times, realistically, our clients, they get in trouble and then they never get in trouble again, which is
Yeah.
good, which is what we want. But a
Sure.
lot of times they're not necessarily the best referral source, just because they're not repeat customers, right?
Right.
Which is good. We're not trying to build a repeat business. We don't want people committing crime after crime after crime. So
Of course.
yeah, it's like any other business. We spend time marketing. We've got marketing vendors, and again, all this is stuff that 5 years ago we didn't have.
Yeah.
But at this point, we're spending money on SEO and PPC, and we're doing outreach campaigns, and we're doing everything we can do to to run a marketing department of a successful business the same way a restaurant would or anybody else would.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Now, so you said you've been a lawyer for 16 years, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Right around 16 years or so. And as
Yes.
soon as you came out of law school, did you work for another firm, or did you right away start your brick law firm?
No. I went and did public defense, right? And so, criminal lawyers that know what they're doing generally kind of have the same kind of background. One is that they work at a public defender's office, right? Working in a public defender's office, or doing court appointments, whatever you want to call them. It's a process of just getting a lot of cases and working with a lot of very, eccentric individuals, a lot of, drug dealers, and a lot of, people that, you wouldn't want to run into in the middle of the night. But you learn, and you learn a lot, and you're in court every day. And, you do that when you're in your 20s. And then at some point you switch over to something else. But by that point, you have done so much
Yeah.
that you know a lot. And the same thing with being a prosecutor. I always say, if you want to be a criminal defense lawyer with a firm and that's doing well later in your career, in your 40s, right? Like I'm 44. I mean, whenever you're in your 40s, you got to spend some time at a prosecutor's office, right? So I tell every law student I talk to, I tell everybody I talk to, going and working in a prosecutor's office is the most valuable thing you can do as a young lawyer. I like it. Like I have a buddy of mine who's a doctor, and he talks about how when you're a young doctor, they throw you in the emergency room, and that it's the worst because you're there all day, all night, but you see everything. He's like, man, I would see kids with a sore throat, and then I'd see someone with a gunshot, and then I'd see somebody with a very severe illness, and I'd see somebody with the flu. And he said, you do that for 2 or 3 years, and then you can start your own medical practice, and you can confidently say, I've seen everything, right? Because I worked for 4 years downtown San Antonio in the emergency room. There is nothing that's going to shock me.
Right.
That's what you get with criminal law. Work in a prosecutor's office, work at a DA's office, do some public defender stuff. You're going to see everything. And then, there's only so many variations of a DWI or a drug case. And eventually you're kind of going to know, hey, I've seen it all. And so that's a really important step for anybody is to spend that time. Nobody gets to come out of law school at 25 and just start, charging a lot of money for big cases with no experience and, no clientele. I mean, you got to put in the work, right? And so for defense lawyers, you put in the work by being a prosecutor or working at a public defender's office. That's where you get all your dirt on you, and you learn it. You learn with the stuff you need to learn.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so then, what year did you actually start the BRCK firm?
5 years ago now. Yeah, 5 years ago.
All
yeah,
right.
and to be fair, I joined up with my the way it worked real quick was my partner Stephen Barrera. He had been in practice for about 12 or 14 years as his own law firm. And I was at a DA's office. I was a prosecutor, and we kind of decided to join forces. And at that point, we kind of renamed the firm BRCK. And we went on from there. And so while BRCK has been around for 5 years, his office, which kind of morphed into our office, has been around for 15, 20 years.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay. So reincarnation in a sense of something that was already there.
Yeah, and I remember I was talking to my accountant about it, and they were like, yeah, doctors and lawyers, and you're constantly changing your names of law firms and LLCs, and they're constantly becoming the something group, and then the associates in this, and so pretty common practice, but we've been around for a while.
Gotcha. Now you got some cool spelling there, there with your logo and your name. Is there something behind that name that goes with that, with those BRCK letters?
Yeah, so we actually went to a branding company, right? And again, this is the process, like we were talking earlier, of kind of running a good business and figuring out. I remember when we first named the law firm, the first logo, we got a guy on Fiverr to do it for like $10, right? And I mean, and some guy based out of India, and he sent us a few ones, and we picked it for $5, and that became our logo, right? And it was like, oh, this is great. And it was really bad in retrospect. Like he didn't. It's not the best logo in retrospect. So a couple years ago, we went to a proper branding agency, and they do their whole thing of what do you stand for and what colors you like, and so they put the whole presentation together. So they came up with it. They came up with the whole BRCK Defense kind of logo and the color scheme and the branding. We try to keep that consistent. Just like a normal business, try to keep it consistent across the different marketing channels.
That's right.
Do all that. But it's another example of us not knowing what we were doing and then kind of evolving into what normal businesses do, which is, go talk to a professional marketing agency and have them tell you what they think will resonate with clients and customers. And so that's where the logo and the name came from.
I like it, man. I think it's really cool. It's different. And I think that's one of the key components of business, right? Is differentiation. How do I stand out, right? There's a bunch of people doing what I do. How can I be, even if it's just a little bit different, right? So that we can.
No, that's one of my favorite things. Better is not better. Different is better, right?
Right.
And so, we're a little different, and hopefully that comes across, on our website and our social media and all the stuff that we're trying to do. And and it's also it's genuine in the sense that, the bulldog approach, I think for one point, 4 or 5 years ago, the idea was we're going to be bulldogs, and that's just not us. The idea is that we're empathetic, we're modern, we use a lot of technology. I'm big on AI and using
Yeah.
professionals and all that kind of stuff. And so the old school, bulldog lawyer, that's not really our spiel. And so hopefully people see that in the colors and the branding and the logo, like, hey, these guys are a little more modern than my great grandfather's law firm.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but your tagline is helping our clients move on with their lives. And
Yeah.
so that really summarizes that. And we're getting close to
Yeah.
wrapping up. So I just have a couple of final questions for you, Chris. But if I find myself in that type of a situation where maybe I drank too much one night, I was having a really good time and it just kind of got out of hand and I made that bad decision to get behind the wheel, right? Or maybe another type of substance ended up in my vehicle. There's a friend with me, and that particular substance is illegal, whatever the case, right? Or maybe my emotions got the best of me one day and I got too angry and I acted out on that against someone that I loved. Obviously those are really bad situations, right? But what should be my first step? I mean, if I find myself arrested, should I try to conversate with the police? Should I try to tell my side of the story? Or should I just keep that brick in mind immediately?
Yeah.
you know?
Now, yeah, everybody kind of knows. It's funny because I think it's been drilled into us from TV shows and movies that you want to remain silent. And officers these days, they're pretty cool about that. Like they kind of get, like, if you say like, "Hey, I'm not going to talk. Like I want a lawyer," that they're not going to have a problem with that. And that's one of the big things is that I think people think that it's going to be perceived by the police officer is, oh, this guy's being a jerk or this guy's being rude and the officer's going to go harder on you or something, right? And the truth is that that's not the way it works. I mean, they're professionals. Police officers are professionals. They're
Yeah.
arresting hundreds of people a year, right? And so, when you say like, "Hey, I don't really have anything to say about this," you don't come across as a bad guy. You come across as a professional. You come across as somebody who's a little smarter than everybody else, and they're going to respect that, and you're not going to have a problem with that. So, yes, in general, whenever you're dealing with the police, if you're arrested, it's over. Like, it's time now to, I always tell people, as respectfully as you're still a human and they're doing their job, as respectfully as possible, just let them know, like, hey, I'm done. You've arrested me. We're not talking anymore about this.
Yeah.
And they're not going to have a problem with it. And then, after that point, that's really where, people kind of go into two different buckets. One bucket is they just do nothing because they're like, well, I got arrested, my life's over, I'm screwed, it's all bad from this point on. But the other bucket of people, and it's the one that you should be in, is the people that contact a lawyer and start getting very proactive in being, active in their defense, active in setting up a defense for future use, and then also, proactive in, those situations. Maybe you need anger management, maybe some AA is in order, and those things, when taken to a judge or a prosecutor, 6 months down the line, they're going to be helpful. They're going to help a lot in your situation. So if you find yourself, getting arrested, you're going to want to clam up. You're not going to talk to the police. And then you're going to get real proactive with your attorney about finding a way to move on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't just sit there and be depressed and feel like, okay, all hope is lost here, right? Do something about it. Get the help that you need. That's pretty much the only way you're gonna, excuse me, be able to really move forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And that's the thing that I hate to see the most, and it does happen, is people get arrested, right? And then they go online and they Google their case and they get all this bad information, right? It's essentially like having a cough or a cold and going on WebMD and convincing yourself that you've got some deadly disease, right? So they
Right.
convince themselves that their life is over. Yeah, and then they get depressed, then they quit their job, then they start drinking more, and the whole thing, falls apart over something that was probably fixable if they had been a little more proactive. So yeah, after an arrest, generally your life's not over.
Yeah,
It really can be used as a stepping stone to, to hopefully better and bigger things.
that's right. For sure. For sure. Chris, you've got a really cool story. You've got a really amazing law firm. The last question I have for you is, what does the future look like for you in the BRCK law firm? Maybe let's say the next 3 to 5 years. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see your law firm? Where do you hope to be?
Sure. So, the idea for us is to keep growing. We are not resting on our laurels. We don't see ourselves as one of these old time law firms that just is sticking around until they close the doors on us. We're aggressive in marketing. We're aggressive in our approach. We want to grow, and the growth is not just self-serving. The idea really is the bigger we get, the more people we can help, right? And if our message is one of, hey, when you get arrested, there's things that we can do to help you move on and help you get better. That's a message that I think is going to do well. And I think it's a message that can help a lot of people, right? So, it's also about, helping people and growing. And so that's us. That's what we're trying to do. Specifically, try to get into new markets here in Texas. There's so many big cities that are, kind of untapped. And I said, we're near Austin, and Austin is just exploding with people and cases and things like that. So the idea is to have a good, strong business that can grow into different markets and help as many people as possible.
That's amazing. I did lie. I had one final question.
No problem, man.
What does Christopher Cavazos do when he's not being a lawyer? What is your downtime? Do you have any hobbies? Who do you like to spend your free time with?
Yeah, no, in general, I do two things. I work and I spend time with my family and kids. And so, I do work a lot. I enjoy work, especially, when you have your own business, right? It's not like I'm punching the clock for somebody else. I enjoy sometimes working on a Sunday, right? And so I do work a lot. And then when I'm not working, I got a wife, Laura, 2 kids, Lucas and Olivia. And then we're constantly doing things here in Texas. We Six Flags, we're doing Six Flags this weekend, Thanksgiving, all that family stuff. So those at this point in my life, those are the 2 things that I do. I work and I spend time with my family.
There you go. Not a bad little setup, my friend. Not a bad little setup.
No complaints. No complaints.
That's awesome. Chris, thank you again very much for being on the podcast today. You got a really cool story, man. I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing over there at BRCK. And I think your future is extremely bright. I think you guys are just barely getting started, actually. So there's a lot for the taking, as you mentioned, and I think a lot of it's gonna probably land in your direction. So keep up the good work, and thank you again for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Marco. I appreciate your time. I'm grateful for you to having me on.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that we put your contact information in the show notes, and that way, if anybody does listen to this, they can, they'll have the information there to reach out to you and your staff, your team.
Thank you again.
Awesome. That does it, guys, for another episode of Business Innovators Radio. We will catch you here next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Podcast with Marco Salinas. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry innovators and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.